I want to quickly get to, because I know you're not going to be here for that long. Let's talk about, you know, uh, his organized status, his disorganized status, his signature, his MO, all of those things as it relates to a serial killer. And I don't want to move too fast because I know our audience, even though people in the true crime community, they probably know this stuff better than we do.
Yeah.
And
And I'm always
I'm
amazed
saying I'm
at
moving too fast.
the questions. The questions are amazing. Sometimes
right. I'm probably not moving fast enough for them, you know. So if we could, and Mike, why don't you ask the doctor on that vein, you know, organized versus disorganized, that type of thing.
Yeah, Doc. Yeah, I had made a comment a while back, a couple months ago. We had done a show originally on Rex Sherman. We talked about, I think, with Bobby Chacon, and we were talking about, you know, a disorganized killer versus an organized killer. And you know, a disorganized killer would leave a lot of clues. They're interested in escaping. They're leaving things. They're not making sure about their DNA, fingerprints, you know, cell phone technology. They're not up on it, and they're maybe easier to catch than an organized person who seems to have their ducks lined up in a row like Huerman. But when I look at some of the things he did, using burlap from his home to wrap the bodies, using a belt that probably belonged to his father, I see some like idiotic, disorganized elements. You know, how would you classify him overall? As somewhat on the disorganized spectrum and not completely on the organized spectrum? Like, where do you fall, like, in the spectrum of organized to disorganized when it comes to Huerman?
That's such a great question, because when I was doing research for my book, I did that. One of the first things I looked at was this organized versus disorganized classification. And, you know, the recent research suggests that really it is not quite as useful as it used to be. And it's for that very reason that you're saying, is that, yes, you have a continuum, and you have some serial killers who fall more toward the organized, some fall more toward the disorganized, but you almost always find elements of disorganization in organized offenders, and you almost always find some level of organization in disorganized offenders, or they wouldn't be able to kill somebody. So I definitely would put Rex Huerman toward the more organized end of things. But you're absolutely right. He made some complete errors in judgment. He did some stupid things. You know, on the one hand, he uses a belt that has potentially his grandfather's initials on there, and yet he's going to all of these links to research all this stuff about, you know, deleting stuff from your computer, and, you know, and the burner phones, and for this person and that person. So I definitely think he's an organized offender if we have to put him in one category or the other, right. But he definitely has some disorganized elements.
Dr. Joni, if you had to predict, and I know that no one knows right now because of the length of time the bodies were out in the elements, if you had to predict how he killed them, what would you say the method was?
If I had to bet on it, I would say I would put all of my money on strangulation.
I would too. I was going to say the exact same thing, asphyxia, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, that is also, to me, this huge 6'6", 280, 300-pound man, sort of like a cowardly way of a man overpowering these little women, you know, that
mostly petite.
Yeah, little petite women. Here's someone from the chat also. There was an interview where Rex Huerman was interviewed at his workplace. In fact, I think he was wearing I think I have a picture of him in his dopey looking suit. Yeah, there he is. And in that interview, he said he was interviewed by an architectural business. He spoke on how sometimes he had to crack the whip on his employees. Wow.
He described himself as a problem solver. They call me when there's a problem. And, you know, I'm seeing, though, a component of organization with his business and with his killing somewhat. But it seems like his home life was very disorganized. Yeah. Hence the house that is, you know, described as a shithole, so to speak. But, you know, with all of those things said, I think maybe they weren't intentional, obviously. They could have been mistakes. I always say that anytime someone starts to think about committing a murder, they're already making the mistakes that are going to get them caught. So maybe in the haste of, you know, killing Amber Costello, I think it was the belt was found on. He just grabbed the first thing, and the burlap. Yeah, that was a big mistake, obviously, because the hairs were able to be embedded into the burlap for an extended period of time, that those victims were out in the elements for about 18 months in some cases or longer, and that hair remained. Whereas if it was a plastic bag and there was a hair, obviously rain, snow, wind would have blown it off and it may not have been found. So I think those definitely signs of mistakes, but I think they might have just been mistakes as opposed to disorganization. That's my opinion.
Well, and you're absolutely right, because Maureen Rayner Barnes was in 2007, they believe. And so she would have been an earlier victim of his. And so it's possible that he, did grab the belt or whatever. And then when he was doing it again, he learned from that, right? So he decided to use something different.